Well, hello everyone. Welcome once again to the Silver Screen Dudes YouTube channel. My name is Nico Leroux. Um, been doing reviews again since it's something you guys have asked for since my almighty James Bond rantathon, which I keep referencing because why not? Oh man, I'm not going to beat around the bush. You've seen from the thumbnail, it's a clap and a thumbs up. Wow, I love this film. Oh man, let me break down why now, because it's kind of a perfect storm of everything, right? So you can see up on the shelf here. Let me bring it down. I literally finished reading this bad boy. Smooth. I literally finished reading this bad boy. All but Rocket's still shaking up there. That's awesome. I literally finished reading this bad boy just a few days ago. Let me just cut into Brandon here saying I liked it, but it was not fun. Very cold and clinical. It was. It very, very, very much was. Let me get into that a little bit. So, as I just said, I finished reading the book, not but a few days before the movie came out. I kind of made it a mission to myself. I'm like, read this book before seeing the movie. The reason I did that is because I'm a massive Lord of the Rings fan, like I'm sure a lot of people are. And I remember growing up, I adored reading Lord of the Rings, absolutely adored it. And my enjoyment for the movie was that much greater because of it. Now, don't get me wrong, I would have enjoyed those movies anyway, even if it wasn't for reading the books, because I know that's that to be true because that happened to a lot of people around the world. A lot of people saw Lord of the Rings and then they went and discovered the books. This has got a bit of a Lord of the Rings vibe to it. Now, do not get me wrong, as Brandon just said, it's not necessarily fun. It didn't have that funness that Lord of the Rings had, and it's not as good a movie as Lord of the Rings, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Like the benchmark for Lord of the Rings is so damn high to the degree that people are actually apprehensive about making fantasy movies now. You know, you look at a fantasy movie now and people are like, yeah, it's good, but it's not Lord of the Rings, right? That's the benchmark. This felt like Lord of the Rings in its scale, in how epic it was, in how well shot it was. I mean, if you don't know, Dune is the story of Paul Atreides, the young son of Duke Leto Atreides. Paul Atreides is played by Timothy Chalamet, the Duke, his father, played by the brilliant Oscar Isaac. Now, the cast in this movie, top to bottom, we've got the likes of Stellan Skarsgård, Dave Bautista, Javier Bardem, Josh Brolin, Rebecca Ferguson. I mean, it's just a top to bottom tour de force, a who's who of Hollywood. And they really, no one's phoning it in. They bring their A game to the table. Batista, yeah, I mean, it's not his fault. And he didn't have much to do in the movie, but what he did well. Just before I continue, Robot Shlomo says, not trolling here, but I read Dune about 3 years ago. I got exactly 538 pages in and said, that's it. I can't take it anymore and donated it to the public library. Love the channel, by the way. Robot Shlomo, thank you so much for liking the channel. And in response to your comment, I completely get it. This thing is it's not the size isn't what bothers me. It is a schlep to get through. It is an absolute schlep to get through. I would argue a much harder read than Lord of the Rings. The difficulty with reading Lord of the Rings is that everything had so many names. John Miller says, howdy partner. John, great to have you back on the channel. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, Lord of the Rings gave everything 3 names: the Ringwraiths, the Nine, the Black Riders, the Nazgul, all the same thing, essentially. But it's one thing. What Dune does, and it doesn't do this in the movie, thankfully, but what the book does, which is why Robot Shlomo just said right now, I got to page 530 and went, enough! Frank Herbert has a way of having huge sections of the book, not description, but invented words. Like there are literally lines and lines and lines where more of the words in the sentence are invented than actual words. That's because it's the name of something, it's the action of something that happens in this galaxy, in this world that Frank Herbert has created. So It is not an easy read. And it's because of that that I think the movie is even more of a success. Here's the reason. As I just said, the book is really hard to get through, but it is rich in description. And as I was saying, it's the story of Paul Atreides, the son of Duke Leto, essentially finding his place in the world. Now, what the movie and the book set up so brilliantly is that Paul's very conception, his existence, is in itself kind of a no-no, a clash. Because on the one hand, he's the son of this great duke, this proud House Atreides of planet Caladan, right? And if I'm losing you already, hold on to your seats. But on the other side, you've got his mother, Jessica. Now, Jessica is what they call a Bene Gesserit. Now, what the Bene Gesserit have is this almighty power called the voice, right? And the voice is something that was very hard to kind of visualize when I was reading the book. And I appreciated it that much more when I actually saw it on screen. Like the way they did the voice was a thing of beauty. But they do make a very, very clear point in the scene in the trailer that everyone's seen. I imagine now, put your right hand in the box. If you remove it, you die. And that is that Paul's been trained in the ways of the Bene Gesserit, and the Bene Gesserit are supposed to be only women, right? So there's this kind of almost a Matrix vibe to it. Is he the one? Because there's this huge prophecy of this one who's meant to set the world free. So it's your typical fantasy fair stuff. Now, the House Atreides, so Paul, his father and mother, are sent to a planet called Arrakis. Now, Arrakis is home to something called the Spice Melange, which is essentially what allows people to do intergalactic travel. So, arguably the most valuable resource in the entire galaxy. Arrakis, for years, has been controlled by the Harkonnens. The Harkonnens are the bad guys of the movie. See it that way. Now, the Emperor, we never see the Emperor, so it's got a bit of a Star Wars vibe to it too. This almighty force in the background, this Emperor, has sent House Atreides, so our heroes, to planet Arrakis in the stead of House Harkonnen, who have basically destroyed the planet. But the movie builds this rivalry between House Harkonnen and House Atreides, the movie, the book, whichever. Just before I continue, let me address a few comments. Robot Shlomo says, the big thing for me was the pace. For 300 pages, nothing happened. So true. So goddamn true. I'll address that in a moment. Then there was a murder, and I said, okay, now we're talking. And it went right back. It's so true. It's so goddamn true. And then let's go. Brandon says, I'm afraid Dune will turn people off because people are looking for Marvel, F9, James Bond. And completely true. I agree. And I'm going to address that in a moment too as well, Brandon. They're also releasing this movie on HBO Max on the same day as and I'm going to address that too. Guys, thank you for all these comments because this is all stuff I want to talk about. Great minds think alike. So, just getting back to the story for people who aren't familiar with Dune. There's a lot of wars that happen. There's there's betrayals. There's murders. And essentially the whole story revolves around Paul in this conundrum, in this identity crisis of who he is. Does he follow the proud lineage of his father, or does he embrace the Bene Gesserit lifestyle and embrace using this voice, the almighty power that is only normally bestowed to women? And the way the movie ends, I have a feel. No spoilers, by the way, in this review. I'm not going to give anything away. But the way this movie ends is purposefully inconclusive. Think of it, the way this movie ends is the way that Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring ended, with Frodo and Sam walking towards Mordor through the Emyn Wheel, right? So it ends with the characters now set on their path. So this movie is all exposition. There is quite a substantial battle that happens, much like in Lord of the Rings, which the first episode, which kind of culminates. Well, you got the Mines of Moria. There's 2 battles in the Fellowship of the Ring. So it culminates with our heroes now very much set on the path ahead. So this first movie is exposition. It's how we get from A to B. But what this movie does brilliantly, which is what the Fellowship of the Ring does brilliantly, which is why I personally maintain the Fellowship of the Ring in terms of not entertainment, but a movie, a story being told, a cohesive narrative. I think the Fellowship of the Ring is the best Lord of the Rings movie. Now, this one does what the Fellowship of the Ring did so successfully. It world builds. It clearly shows you where our characters belong in this big galaxy. So that's it for the story. Saying anything more would be going into spoiler territory. But now here's why I think the movie is an amazing success. And just to bring up Brandon's comment here again, where you're also releasing this movie on HBO Max, right? Do not, for the love of God, see this movie on your home screen. I've got a massive TV in my living room. I've got a 65-inch behemoth surround sound that works, right? Do not, for any money, watch this movie on your home screen. This movie demands that you see it on the big screen. I cannot stress that point enough. Please, please, please do not miss this. This is really, I'd go so far as to say it's this year's cinema experience in terms of it being a visual, grandiose, epic treat. For the visuals alone, you have to see this on a big screen. Now, what Denis Villeneuve, the director, has shown over the years after Prisoners in Sicario is that he's got a very unique eye, but an amazing eye for the big set piece. Think of Arrival. Think of those huge alien ships, right? Very unique looking and very much Denis Villeneuve's playground. He brings everything he learned from Arrival into this. Think of how, whether you love or hate Blade Runner 2049 is irrelevant. What can't be disputed is that Blade Runner 2049 is a beautiful movie. Like what he does from a cinematography perspective with light in that movie. He brings all of those toys to the party in Dune. And that's what really struck me about this movie, is just how goddamn pretty it is. The visuals, this is why I liken it to Lord of the Rings, is because he's done this really clever balance of both miniature and visual effects and practical effects. So it's kind of these three brilliant artistries all combined together to make this grandiose planet, Arrakis, feel that much more real and lived in. What's really cool is that every single character you can in this movie, you can very much tell which culture they belong to, which race they belong to, much like Lord of the Rings. Elves, dwarves, Fremen, Atreides, Harkonnen, Saduka. You can really tell who the people are. And the great thing about this, going back to what Robot Shlomo said earlier, the great thing about experiencing it this way is that, let me just bring this up again. There are literally 300 pages in the book where nothing happens. This is so true. And what's great about the movie is that there's been some very clever, creative decision making about what can be taken out. Because what Frank Herbert's guilty of in his book is he almost overdoes it with the world building, something Tolkien I don't think was guilty of. Herbert overdoes it with the world building, and Denis Villeneuve has been and Dipler, the scriptwriter, have been very, very clever in knowing what to cut and what not to cut. There were some scenes, especially towards the beginning, where I was like, okay, we're heading into this part now. Didn't happen. A bit like, again, in the Fellowship of the Ring, a bit like Tom Bombadil. That whole scene from the book, those three chapters, you know, the Old Forest, in the House of Tom Bombadil, Fog on the Barrow Downs. I'm getting proper geeky here. Fog on the Barrow Downs, completely cut from the movie. The Hobbits escape the ring wraiths, we're in Bree. Huge section cut out. They did some creative decision making similar to that in this movie, and it all honestly is for the better. The book, as Robot Shlomo has said, is slow. The movie, it knows when to speed up and it knows when to take a breath and build character. Now, Let's Go Brandon actually comes in here and says, with all my complaints with New Dune, I want this film to win Oscars for Best Picture. Yeah. I'll get to that in a little bit. Now, I want to go back to Brandon's first comment here. I liked it, but it was not fun. Very cold and clinical. That's true. If you're expecting, and the trailers can be a bit misleading because what the trailers led you to believe is we're going to have a fantasy sci-fi world building action-packed adventure. It's not that. You have to be prepared. There are scenes of action, but they are few and far between. What you're getting is a world building character piece, a self-discovery of a young man. And it's not a coming of age story. I want that to be very clear. It is not a coming of age story, but it is an identity story. It's about a young man setting himself on a path, much like Frodo did at the end of the Fellowship, as I've already said. But this movie, I walked out of this, and as I said at the beginning, it's kind of a perfect storm of everything because it's the last movie I'm going to see in the cinema for a while, but with my little baby arriving here, right? And that's literally in a week and a half. So cross your fingers for me, please, guys. But yeah, it's going to be my last cinema experience, at least for the next month and a half. I'll still be making content on the channel intermittently now and then when I can, but it's going to be not necessarily newer reviews. I might do things like some Throwback Thursdays, but it's the last cinema experience I'm going to have for a while. And the last three movies that I was planning on seeing in the cinema prior to my child's birth were James Bond, No Time to Die, flop. Venom, Let There Be Carnage, meh. And both of those reviews are on the channel now if you want to see them. This, I walked out feeling, despite what Brandon says, it is cold and clinical. It really is. But I walked out being satisfied, fulfilled, and really impressed by what I've just experienced. And I think this movie, especially for people who haven't read the book, I think it's one of those things where there's a lot to take on. Like, there is so much world building going on. But I think it's going to be one of those movies where on repeat viewings, it gets better and better and better. And I really do hope this is a movie that people continuously talk about. The reason I don't do ratings is like get 8 out of 10, 10 out of 10 like I used to do is because I much prefer kind of like an open discussion and kind of treating this as a think tank. I wouldn't have the first clue how to rate this movie. Here's an interesting thing before I move on to the next point. This was a press screening that I was lucky enough to go to, and there were 3 or 4 people who walked out of it, and I didn't see them come back in. And maybe they sneaked in on the side. I don't know. But the 3, 4 people who sort of walked in front of me, so from that side, they didn't come back. So I can only say maybe they left, maybe they weren't entertained. I don't know. Take that as you will. 3 or 4 people, not at the same time, intermittently throughout the movie, did actually walk out of the movie. So what that means about their level of entertainment, I'm not sure. The 2 journalists who were next to me, I say this really patronizingly. I'm not a fucking journalist. I'm not even a movie pundit. I'm just a movie fan. But the 2 guys who were next to me, who were journalists, kind of looked at each other at the end and they were like, I'm not sure what to make of that. And here's the thing, and this is why I mentioned the ending. I don't know if the ending is going to be that proper culmination of satisfaction. Because the other thing is, Dune isn't as known a quantity. I'd like to believe it's not as known a quantity, or ever was as known a quantity as Lord of the Rings. I hope I'm not making a boo-boo there. But people at the end of the Fellowship of the Ring were very aware that there's another one coming. I think people are maybe expecting this movie to be conclusive. It's not. It finishes the way the Fellowship of the Ring finishes. And I have a feeling, especially when you see this movie again as a world-building piece, in hindsight, once the other movies have released, I genuinely believe this movie is going to be that much better. But this movie oozes class, top to bottom. The actors are on top form. The pacing of the movie, considering, as Robot Shlomo said, considering the pacing of the movie, of the book, being really tedious at best at some points, the pacing of the movie, considering the source material, is masterfully done. The effects are out of this world good. That's why I'm saying you need to see it in the cinema. The characters, you will really love them. You will really hate them. The script is good. What they've done with lighting in this movie is a thing of utter beauty. Even I was paying attention. I was trying to find fault in this movie by the end of it. You know, costumes are usually a cheap way to throw shade at a movie. Even the costumes are good. I was like, everything in this movie is good. The sets are great. The effects are great. The lighting's great. The cinematography is great. The act. I cannot really fault this movie. But despite that, I do think Brandon makes a very, very good point. It is cold and clinical. It's not going to be a bombastic tour de force. Let me just bring in some comments here. Sorry, I think this has been a bit of a slow response to this. Robot Shlomo says, yeah, that those 3 Tom Bombadil chapters sort of ground the film to a halt. So this is it. Exactly that. They know what to cut. And that's what has been done in this movie. Let's go. Brendan says, if I was Denis Villeneuve, I would have released 3 15-minute web episodes and do the whole Dune book as the movie. Interesting. I'm actually interested about that. Let me mull on that a moment. If I was Denis Villeneuve, I would have released 3 15-minute web episodes and do the web episodes to kind of build the world pre-movie. If that's what you mean, I would agree with that. That's not a bad shout at all. And then Robot Shlomo says, funny story. When I saw Fellowship, there was a couple sitting in front of me. But when Fredo says to Sam, I'm glad to be on this journey with you, in the credits rolled, they said, that's it. Okay, bingo. Those are the type of people who are going to be equally like, huh? Muffed? Queried by this ending. And as Brandon's already alluded to, this is not peppered with action, this movie. But man, for the ride you're given as a setup movie, which is how you have to view it, it is an exposition setup movie. Jesus Christ, it's good. And honestly, it is in contention for being one of my favorite movies of the year. I rate this film so highly. And as I said, the perfect storm, as I've mentioned, and it brings me such joy that I get to now leave the cinema for a few months before I can come back and being like, that last movie I saw, yeah, that was good. I had a really, really good time with that. And ultimately, I think that's all we can ask for from a cinema experience is, was I satisfied? Was I impressed with what I saw? Was I entertained? Yes, yes, yes. I really loved the experience, the visual and audio and experiential experience that I had yesterday. Bum in seat, popcorn in face. It was just good. And it's one of those movies that I cannot stress this enough. I'll repeat it again. Please, please, please see it in the cinema. And now I'd like to address this HBO fuckery that's gone on. And I'm sure that's now just demonetized me because I've dropped the F-bomb. But yeah, what scares me about the future of this franchise, Christopher Nolan is on record saying that when they announced that HBO, that AT&T had said that HBO Max was a thing and that Warner Brothers were releasing all their content on HBO Max, Christopher Nolan, the darling child of Warner Brothers, basically said, and he tweeted this, I believe, he said, I went to sleep working for the best studio in the world and I woke up working for the worst streaming service in the world. That's a deep shot. Denis Villeneuve did a whole self-written article for Variety where he was explaining how disappointed he was in the studio's decision to do that, how he felt betrayed, how he felt that his vision just wouldn't make sense on a smaller screen. I completely support everything he is saying. This needs to be seen on the big screen. And the reason I'm very afraid for the future of this movie is because if the studio have successfully managed to piss off the director of this film, they own the rights to this. It's not like Denis Villeneuve can just say, screw you, I'm going to make Dune 2 elsewhere. No. Warner Brothers own the rights to this. And there are plenty of great directors out there, but I would very much like to see Denis Villeneuve do the entire series of Dune. I don't want to see another director come in. I wanted to see Peter Jackson do the three Lord of the Rings movies. Conversely, I wanted to see JJ do the 3 new Star Wars movies, but we know which way that went, right? So I'm genuinely quite afraid about where this is all going, because the movie is, as I've said, is inconclusive. But how do you now fix this problem where you've got an open movie which needs a sequel and you've pissed off the director? Now, I'm going to give you my opinion on the HBO thing. I think it's an utter disgrace what they've done. I don't think they have any right when they've gone into, and people are like, well, it's the studio. They've got the right to do what they want. In the cynical sense and in the most obvious sense and black and white sense, sure, of course, they own it. These people work for them. They can do what the hell they want with it. But I'll tell you this, guys, it's not the studios who are the creatives. This is the reality check that a lot of people forget. People are like, everything's moving towards streaming service now. That's not a good thing. Look, here's a good example. Netflix. We all love Netflix. We all have a Netflix account, right? I find it very, very hard to identify a Netflix original movie that I can honestly say that's not just a good movie, that's a great movie. That's something that's in contention for the Oscars. People are going to pull Roma out the bag, right? Roma was an interesting one because it kind of had this HBO treatment. It was both Netflix and wide release. The Irishman, as much as people want to defend Scorsese, wasn't that good. And then you go beyond that to the movies that didn't get, the huge public outcry of recognition, and you start thinking about the other Netflix movies, that Natalie Portman movie. What was it called? That sci-fi movie? I'm blanking. Completely blanking. My apologies. But that wasn't very good. The Chris Hemsworth Indian action movie. Not very good. And these are only recent ones. And I can't even remember the names. And I'm usually quite good with things like that. I can't even remember the names of these movies. That's how little an impression they've left on me. So Netflix is a really good example of, it's great to have the literal library of Alexandria of movies at your fingertips. But when these studios are in control creatively of how the movie's being made, it doesn't work so much. You do not piss off your creatives. If you are a studio, your business is to make money out of your movie, of course, which is why I laughed so hard when I saw James Bond not doing well at the US box office, because that ending, it deserved to not do well. So you're a studio. Your job, bring the people together, the producers, bring the right people together to make a great film, and then they market the fuck out of it and they make money. However, they should not be getting involved with the creative process, and they shouldn't be pissing off their creatives. It's a bad idea. You can have the best script in the world. You can have the best set of actors attached to this project, which for all intents and purposes they do. If you don't have the right person at the helm to bring it all together, you may as well not exist. You may as well not have any of these great toys. It's like someone said to you, here's some building blocks, and we're going to tell you how to build them. Instead of letting some, one of those Lego wizards just look at the blocks and go, build it up. A Lego genius creates something. A producer follows the instructions in the Lego manual. That's kind of the very weird, but yeah, that's kind of the difference I'm making. You need to have a Lego genius to create something brilliant that's not just out of the box instruction manual. And I'm afraid a producer brings the right people together. The director, the creative, makes the movie great. And you piss off people like Villeneuve and Nolan, you are on to a hiding to nothing. So I am terrified about where this franchise is going, because HBO, the shithousery they've done, stupid. But I don't want to end on a downer. I want to end on despite what Warner Brothers have done. This movie, honestly, it is deserving of your time. It is 100% deserving of your hard-earned money. Go to the cinema and experience this. I cannot stress that enough. Let's go. Brandon says, Denis Villeneuve is the best director in my life, but he might not see a big budget action movie anymore. Too many financial losses. It's actually not of that. That's quite a valid point, to be fair. But here's the weird thing, right? Is that you can't say that any of these big budget, beautiful movies he's done have been poorly received critically or from audiences. The problem is, and this is kind of a bigger picture now, is that an Arrival, which is hailed as one of the great modern sci-fi movies, a Blade Runner 2049. The problem with this, and this again kind of goes to the producer level, is that too much money was given for something which never necessarily had the marketability to justify the budget. And that's not because Villeneuve made a bad movie. That's because it's an audience thing, right? That's people like us who are only drawn now to the big IPs. Here's an example. A few years ago, I believe 2017 or 2018, still one of the best movies I've seen in the modern age came out, called A Prayer Before Dawn. It's got Joe Cole in it, the actor, not the footballer. And I reviewed it on the channel. Hardly anyone talks about it. But do you know why it's okay? It's because it didn't have a massive budget and it knew what to do about it. I still tell people to go and see it. And the people who have listened to me and who have seen A Prayer Before Dawn are like, Jesus Christ, that's one of the best films I've seen in recent years. It's like, yeah, buddy. Yes, it is. And if you guys are all new to it too, and you haven't seen A Prayer Before Dawn, please, I implore you to go and see that movie. And then you can go and watch the review that's on the channel, which is from a few years back now. But unless it says Marvel or comic book or big IP, here's the weird thing about audiences, right? We all like criticize Hollywood for reboots and sequels and prequels and sidequels and spin-offs and all of this malarkey. But the thing is that that's kind of where we only put our money. And I get it, time is money, and the two things that most people are strapped for in life are time and money. So people have to be very selective about what they're going to see. People can't go and see all the movies. It's just not possible. And of the few movies that people get to see, they're only going to give their hard-earned money to something they know is a surefire guarantee of entertainment. They're not going to necessarily do what I do or do what some of you guys do, which is, take a risk on something that's a bit different. Take a risk on something that's not a big IP, So studios will back the big Marvel movies. And I think Brandon, you raise an interesting point. I don't know if Villeneuve will be given more big budget blockbusters. I don't think that's his fault though. And I don't necessarily think it's a studio's fault. I think that speaks to a wider problem in the movie sphere about audience decision making. And no one's right or wrong here. I'd like that to be clear. I'm not pointing the finger of blame at anyone saying you guys all suck because you only go and watch prequels and big IPs and sequels and spin-offs. Shit, I watch them too. It's just the name of the game. But it definitely opens up a question on a bigger question, which is, at what point do we, because we can only speak with our money. You can sign every petition you want, but if Marvel keep making $1 billion every time they make a movie, they will continue to make those movies. It's just good business sense, right? And as long as movies like A Prayer Before Dawn, which granted don't have a big budget but aren't even spoken about, there's no reason for studios to make those little movies, And then you've got movies which is like what Brandon and I are talking about now, which are big budget, and they've got a relatively big IP behind them. Frank Herbert's Dune is an all-timer sci-fi book, from what I understand. I mean, I enjoyed it, but if people don't back it, you won't necessarily see movies like these. So it's a kind of milli big spin of problems going on here. It's audiences' faith in what they're going to see. It's needing something that they can be guaranteed to have a good time with, because people don't go to the cinema that often. Well, not often enough, in my opinion. That doesn't mean you guys. That means people in general. We're talking about big picture here. And Brandon, let's go. Brandon says, Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 are also called in clinical. I wish Denis made more Sicarios. That movie was fine. Hey, do you know what, Brandon? I'm going to share something with you here, bro. I'm one of those weird people who did not care for Sicario. I thought it was boring. And I know I'm weird. I'm weird as hell saying it. And I appreciate I'm on a very, very small island. But yeah, Sicario didn't work for me, man. And then he's come in and said, A Prayer Before Dawn was okay. Just Joe Cole can't fight. This is true. You can tell when he's in the Muay Thai ring, like his kicks are stiff as hell. He doesn't have that beautiful Muay Thai swing that the Thai boxers have at all. Completely agree with that. But yeah, I mean, I've said this on podcast a few times. Billy Moore, I actually met when I was living out in Asia. He's a cool dude. Been through some shit, as the movie showed you. But yeah, so this has gone into a very interesting direction where we've talked about the Warner Brothers' terrible decision to, essentially ostracize their creatives. We've talked about decisions made by the movie fans and why the studios will only back certain movies and how movies make a loss. So as always, thanks to you guys, we've had a really fun discussion here. But I will finish off now by saying this movie is worth your time. It is cold and clinical, as Let's Go Brandon has said, but it's worth your money. It is a hell of an interesting cinema experience. Very unique. It's clean. It is cold, but it is clean. It is a beautiful thing to behold. It is actors at the peak of their powers. And I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I thoroughly, thoroughly, thoroughly recommend it. The other thing I thoroughly recommend is it is now 5:30 p.m. British Standard Time. At 9 p.m. tonight, we have got the Top 10 Show. Our weekly Top 10 Show is here. It's the week. So yeah, it's here. Weird tangent. But yeah, so the Top 10 Show tonight, in honor of Venom Let There Be Carnage, we are doing the top 10 comic book movie villains. You see how I was just saying movie fans only go and see big IPs? Well, here we are about to talk some big IP stuff, right? So we are going to be talking about the top 10 comic book movie villains. I invite everyone to come and join us. It's going to get really geeky, really nerdy. And AJ doesn't know this yet because I haven't told him, but it's going to open with us having an almighty argument, because here's a spoiler. And here's something I can't get my head around. AJ, my best friend, my co-host on the Movie Mount Rushmore podcast, does not like Woody Harrelson. And we are going to argue like crazy as our opening. He doesn't know it's coming. I'm going to set it up and we are going to argue. So get ready for the argument. And then once the argument's done, I don't believe I'm going to change his mind, but you guys can all throw shade at him too. So I need some support here, please. 9 p.m. tonight on the channel. The link for upcoming live streams should be on the channel's main page already. Thumbnail and everything's all created. So the link's there. Just do me a favor, come and join us at 9 p.m. Come and share in the geeky goodness of top 10 comic book movie villains. We will both have very different lists, as we always do. And I would love to hear what your guys' top 10 comic book movie villains are on the podcast later. For now, have you guys seen Dune? What did you think of it? I would love to know. Oh, well, just as I said that, Horse says Dune was great. I agree, Horse. Dune was indeed great. I completely agree with that sentiment. So that's it for now. Dune, as Horse just said, was amazing. I recommend it. It deserves your money. It deserves your time. Tell me what you thought of it in the comments section. If you're not catching this live, I'll still go back and read the comments. Please share this with anyone who you think may be interested to watch a silly blonde British guy with dumb long hair talk about ad nauseum at length about a movie which people are pretty much going to enjoy. But yeah, anyone who's interested, share the link, and I will see you guys in 3.5 hours right here on the channel for our top 10 comic book movie villains. So until then, I'm Nico from the Silver Screen Dudes. Thank you so much, guys, and I'll hopefully see you in a